So there are a few more important polygon modeling tools that we can look at that get used all the time. So we looked earlier at bridging and extruding. We also inserted edge loops. Going into object mode, holding down shift, inserting an edge loop tool. And you'll notice that when I click on this at the default settings, it tries to follow a clear path of polygon edges around, and will insert a loop of polygons, of edges, sorry, to subdivide the polygons. And it works by clicking and then releasing when you're in the position that you want. And the reason for adding local geometry is so, let's say we smooth this and we want to add some kind of detail here. I select all these edges, and I can select a ring of edges by double clicking on one. If I just scale these down, maybe select these edges, scale them together, we can get sort of a local deformation here. If we try and do that elsewhere, where there's not as much geometry close together, you can see we don't have as much control over the shape. So you need topology in order to control the shape of an object. And so sometimes inserting an edge loop will allow you to do that. Extruding also allows you to do that. So if I select this face and extrude this out, I've added some more local topology. If I add some divisions in there, then it's even tighter together. And if I go into edge mode here, scale these down, then I can get sort of a local deformation that's constrained by the surrounding edges. However, you don't always have the opportunity to put in clean edge loops, or perhaps you don't want an edge loop to go all the way along. So if I shift, right click, insert edge loop tool, if I want to go this way, you can see it goes all around the object. And I might need some extra topology here, but not everywhere. So there's another tool that allows us to make local cuts, and that's called the Multicut tool. And so if I go into object mode, select the Multicut tool, you can see there are some settings for it here. Since it's a tool rather than an action, we can set the settings before we activate it. So the Multicut tool allows you to make cuts on an object. And you can see it starts to snap to whatever component it's closest to. So right now it's looking for vertices or edges. So if I click on this edge, click on this edge, I could click over to a vertex, back to an edge, back to an edge, over to a vertex, and then close. Oh, I don't think that worked properly. Let's see. Hit enter. Yeah, I kind of missed the connection there. But you can see that it is making cuts and just adding new edges into your topology. Let me undo that. Now you'll notice that when I'm doing this, when it goes to a vertex, it doesn't always go right to where the vertex is. It's sometimes picking vertices on the opposite side, or because we're in smooth mode, it's finding the location of the unsmooth vertex. So if I go into one mode, this will give us a much more accurate representation. So here, let's try that again. Start with a vertex, go to an edge, 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 back to a vertex, cut an edge, edge, and then close it at that vertex. Hit enter. And now what this does is it allows us to just add some local geometry. And then I might cut this again, so I still have the tool active. And now if I want to finish the tool and then relaunch it, I hit Y on the keyboard. Enter to finish. So what does this allow us to do? So get out of the tool just by hitting Q. So if I select these central vertices here, this new cut that I made, if I go into W to move, I can move these down. Then when I go into smooth mode, I can kind of make a little wrinkle here, and if I have this geometry, selected the surrounding vertices, and I can scale these together to actually model in a little local wrinkle without having to put an edge loop that travels all the way around. Now you notice though that I've started adding some weird geometry here. Not too weird. Everything is still four-sided. Not that all your geometry has to be four-sided, but it will give you the cleanest results if you can keep it four-sided for as long as you can. So that is using the Multicut tool. Very useful. So you'll notice that I'm smoothing the model all the time by hitting 3 on the keyboard. 1 shows the low res mode, 3 shows the smooth mode, 2 shows the low res superimposed over the high res. But if I actually want to smooth it, which means to subdivide it, actually change the nature of the surface, because this is really just a preview of what it would look like. It's not actually changing the shape node of the object. It's not actually subdividing. But we can use the smooth option here. This actually adds a smooth node, and you can change the number of divisions. The problem with this is that it becomes much more difficult to edit once you smooth an object with a smooth node. So typically you want to do this as your last action if it has to be smooth. You can get rid of it by putting your divisions back to 0. And if you've lost this interface, you can go back to the channel box and choose the smooth face from the history, and you can see all my other history here, putting in those edge loops, doing the splits here, extruding, so you can see how construction history can build up. But if everything, if you put a smooth on and you want to get rid of it, go back into the poly smooth face, turn the divisions to 0, and then go to edit, delete by type, history, and it gets rid of all that construction history, and the smooth is gone. So now if you wanted to, you could go to mesh smooth, and now that's the only element of the construction history on here. So you can turn this on and off when you do and when you don't need it. So this is something that you can do. There are other ways to smooth an object for rendering, but if you actually want to change the nature of the surface, this is the way to do it. There are a couple other tools to look at here. One is the Bevel Tool, which again is something you typically do at the end of your action when you're doing kind of mechanical tool modeling. So a piece of geometry like this, if you're modeling a mechanical item, it has a perfectly 90-degree angle edge. It's perfectly sharp, but this isn't going to catch the light correctly because the real world object wouldn't actually be like this. And so typically you'd want to add some bevel to the edges. Now depending on the rendering package you're using, it's something you can do at render time, but you can actually add it to the model. And if we select the model and go to bevel, we can change the fraction, which is how much of the edge is beveled off. And you can type in a value, 0.05, let's say. And then change the number of segments. That's how many divisions there are inside here. So as I change this, you can see it's adding divisions inside the bevel. So you just want enough. To do that, chamfer has to do with what it's doing with the vertices when it comes across them. And now you'll have a nicely rounded edge cube here that will render more realistically. It will catch the light on this edge rather than having a perfectly sharp corner. But again, this is something you want to do at the end because you're introducing a lot of small geometry into your model, and it makes editing more difficult. And so you'd want to finish your model before you do the bevel. I'm just going to undo out of this, and just to show you that you don't have to do the whole object. If you wanted to, I could just select a couple of edges and just bevel these, and it would do just the same thing. So it's a good way to make a more natural looking corner like that. So there's some more tools, and with these tools you can build almost anything. We'll talk about a few extra ones later on, but all these are the basics.